Well, as rolling blackouts continue to frustrate, the effects are widespread, with the economy taking a further hammering. The education sector has not been spared. The gap between privileged and disadvantaged schools starkly evident. Independent schools rely largely on backup generators, while public schools, in sharp contrast, have no plan B, as SABC News senior reporter Chriselda found out.
While the Curtis Nkondo School of Specialization in Soweto is one of the educational facilities that is severely impacted by the country's current rolling blackouts, offering maths, science, ICT, engineering. Well, the school does not use textbooks. You have e-books as well as cue boards for the teachers. So every time you have the lights going off, that does impact the process of learning and teaching here. It's a tough balancing act. So-called schools of the future unable to provide 21st century education with the lights going on and off. When power is restored, it's a rush to get in as much work as possible. And even though schools like this have backup, it's unsustainable to keep the generator running. What then for thousands of schools that are far worse off?
A large majority of them do not have generators. Yes, some of them don't require electricity, but for administration purposes, all our schools have computers. How are we going to receive data that we need for SASMs, which we use to report on the daily activities of schools, which we use for decision making, which we use for tracking the operation of schools? We rely on power for that to happen. It's impractical, actually, to provide a generator for every school. We've got more than 25,000 schools. Just imagine that number of generators. And where would the money come from? Because we don't have budget for such things.
In stark contrast to independent schools, where learning and teaching continues without disruption.
Within our membership, I think we're close to about 100% of schools actually being able to have some form of generators. But the greatest impediment had been for many schools is the cost of trying to get solar panels and battery support. So I think that when you look at solar panels and battery support, that number I think would drop to around 10% of schools are going to the solar route. But I think that now they're going to have to just simply budget for it, because there's no way that you can continue functioning in a school in which there's no electricity.
Widening the gap between the haves and the have-nots.
They're sitting in classrooms that already have a shortage of textbooks, of stationery, teaching capacity. Their classrooms are overcrowded. And so where there isn't power and energy, and they don't have access to meals, and teachers can't do any printing, it just really means that they get left behind. That is the language that members of Equal Education that are school-going are using. We get left behind because our peers can continue with learning during these periods. So I do worry that the school community is most affected by long hours of load shedding, are sitting in the quintile 1 to 3 and sometimes 4 schools, which already experience huge amounts of inequality. So it perpetuates the inequality, if anything. And I really do, from a very humble place, wish the Department of Education to be talking to national collaborative ministerial committees around what ESCOM and the Energy Department can do to support education in schools during this period.
With no end in sight to the rolling blackouts, effective learning and teaching blighted. Chriselda, SABC News in Johannesburg.